west of Chester, but I am a senior experience designer on the Adobe Learn team. I teach intro to interaction design at the University of Miami, and I'm also an illustrator. So I want to give you a little bit of background about who I am and who raised me. So I was raised by a Nicaraguan mom, Milagros, and a Cuban dad, Jose. And they met in a very Miami way at a pharmacy called Navarro, which I'm sure if you're a Miami local, you know it. So this is little me. I grew up in a small neighborhood in Miami called Westchester, which would grow up to play a very pivotal part of my creative journey. Sure, that'd be good. Thank you. I'm just doing like a semi-dance move in between, but thank you, Angel. Cool, so I want to walk you through a little bit of my career journey. So we'll start with my photography era. I actually attended Parsons School of Design for photography. I was the first person in my family to go to college, which meant that there were a lot of interesting conversations as a 17-year-old to telling my parents that I wanted to go to art school. Many conversations. But I was able to get a scholarship and make it over there. And throughout my time at Parsons, I did a lot of internships. I interned at places like Teen Vogue, In Style, and Milk Gallery. And after 4 years of school and countless internships, I landed a first full-time job at Condé Nast Traveler as an assistant photo editor. And all of that, I ended up hating it. So, which led me to the next section of my career development, which was my trying things out phase, right? So after working at Condé Nast Traveler and seeing that that job was not for me, I ended up quitting my job and spending the summer back in Miami. That summer was great, also terrifying, because I didn't have, for the first time in my life, I didn't have a direction. I had always been someone that I knew what my next step was always, and this was a moment of figuring things out. So it was terrifying. But in all of that anxiety, I created photo illustrations, which led me to discover design. And through many GIFs, illustrations, pseudo collages, I ended up having a body of work that allowed me to pitch myself for a freelance job at Univision, and I ended up getting my first freelance project, which led me to design in a more proper way. And then I decided that I should go back to school. So I went to the University of Miami for my MFA. They have a relatively new program called the Interactive Media Program, where I attended. And during my time there, I started to freelance and just try to build up my portfolio. I knew that the portfolio that I currently had was not enough to get me a job as a UX designer, which was what my focus on was in school. So I just started again. I interned again. I felt like I was starting over countless of times. But through all of that, I was able to build up a portfolio after graduating, and then I finally landed a full-time UX design role. The pandemic. So that full-time role that I spoke of in that previous slide was at an agency in New York City. So I got the job, and they said, you have 3 weeks to move in New York, and this was in March 2020. So we uprooted our lives and moved to New York, only to work remote from a tiny studio for 2 years. So I ended up really missing Miami and my family, which led me to the next era, which was the back to my roots. This is where I started an illustration project, which really spawned out of homesickness. So I started to share my work and created my first public art account called West of Chester. And I started that in November 2020, so it was in honor of the neighborhood that I grew up in, Westchester. I had been drawing for a few years, but in 2020, I finally worked up the courage to create an Instagram account that was public, and I started to share my art. And I mostly started with patterns. So you'll see here, those patterns were very reminiscent of my upbringing, right? So it was a lot of cafecito, fabulosos, my abuela yelling out on Saturday mornings, which I'm sure is a familiar theme to many. And then again, themes of my childhood, right? Like La Única crackers, Materva, Celia Cruz, things that would bring me comfort in this moment. And I started to build momentum. So I was still very deep into making patterns at that point, and my art started to get a little bit of traction. I started to get followers from people I didn't know, and accounts that I had long admired, like We Are Me Too. And they started to share and repost my work. And it felt like things were starting to fall into place. And then I started to feel stuck, which I'm sure many creatives can identify with this feeling. So I had my account for a year, and I was starting to feel a little bit restricted by the patterns that I was making. So a large amount of the work that I was doing was pattern-based, and it started to get overwhelming, and it wasn't feeling creatively fulfilling anymore. So I wanted to try something new, but finding that new focus was proving to feel difficult, and I was feeling a little bit unmotivated. So a theme in my life, going back to Miami to recharge. So that summer, I came back home. And then I started to draw buildings of places I grew up going to. So I grew up on 27th Street and 82nd Court, so Arbiter was a major fixture of my childhood.
I worked there, actually.
Did you? Oh, got the cheese fries inside? Amazing. And I just made my way down Bird Road, right? These were all places that brought me comfort, and as I kept drawing them, I started to feel more creative control, and I began to feel very energized that I was able to recreate my memories. And I found that the key was memories, right? So I was really feeling energized by the work that I was doing, and it felt inspiring to have control of these landmarks. I had a big move in my teenage years where I lost a lot of the photographs growing up, right? So in a way, redrawing these memories was like regaining control of those memories and those photographs that I've lost, and having my own control of those memories through color and illustration style. And I noticed that the account started to gain traction. So people seemed to like what I was doing, and I was quickly getting a lot of drawing requests. So many requests that I ended up making a Google form. One of the things that I heard the most were that people were saying that my drawings were nostalgic, and they were asking me to create or to draw a place next. So I love a list. I'm sure many designers do. So I made the ultimate one of requests. And the project started to evolve. This is La Vaquita, known formerly as Farm Stores. This is Versailles. Mary's Cafe, home to the best pan con bistec. And the project started to grow and gain momentum. And in 2023, Oh Miami, which is a local poetry nonprofit that hosts a poetry festival, reached out to me to submit a project for that festival. So I submitted a concept, and that concept was called El Palacio de los Recuerdos, which was a custom-built memory box that was built in partnership by my partner Brandon, seated for a front row, brown cardigan. And this invited folks to share their memories growing up in Miami. And as many of you know, the name of the project was an homage to the iconic El Palacio de los Jugos, which is a major Miami landmark. This is from concept to execution. So that is the box in all of its glory. We had these little papers that invited people to share their memories inside of that box. And yeah, we would host activations around the city where we would just talk to people and invite them to share what their memories were in Miami. And the goal of all those submissions was to ultimately create a compiled nostalgic map illustration. Pictured here. So it took loosely a lot of those memories and poems that people submitted, and I tied them together to zip codes and created El Palacio de los Recuerdos map edition. And around this time, I was able to go on public radio to talk about the project. So I was invited by our local NPR station, WLRN, to speak with legendary journalist Carlos Frias to talk about El Palacio de los Recuerdos, but also by illustrations and my path to becoming an artist. It was a very big moment for my parents because they were finally able to hear from someone else what I did, as opposed to me talking about it. It evolved from it being a computer, right? Like contextualize it to an actual project. And then, yeah, I think a theme here is I start to get restless often and I start to have a lot of ideas. So as a surprise to no one, I started to think about new project ideas. And I landed on doing an ABCs of Miami project. This was actually a project that I attempted to do a few years ago while I was at UM. But you know, I lost momentum with projects and portfolios. But I started up with the letter A, a quick sketch. I just wanted to see what would happen. And the community had so many ideas. And there was so much pressure to keep going. So in some ways, it served as an accountability method. And almost immediately, people started to ask about a book. People hadn't really seen ABCs of Miami being illustrated in a way that felt familiar to them. And it was just really nice to connect with people and have that kind of encouragement and community building, because it often felt like I wasn't just building this book by my own, right? I crowdsourced a lot of the places, so it was this communal yearbook that took form and shape of a book. And there she is, the West of Chester's ABCs of Miami. So as I mentioned, this was a crowdsourced book, which is bilingual and features poems from Miami locals. And after a year and a half, that book is now out now. It's a sneak peek of a spread of P for Palacio de los Jugos, but as you see here, there is a poem accompanied alongside an illustration. So every letter has a poem, and it is in English and in Spanish. Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about the work that I do at Adobe, right? So I often say that West of Chester is my passion project, but I work at Adobe as my day job, so I want to give you a little bit of insight of what that looks like. So, as David mentioned, Adobe Max was recently hosted in Miami, and I am the only Miami person on my team. So, when our Learn team decided to do a booth at Max, I was given the responsibility to lead and concept what that booth would look like. No pressure. So I first wanted to make a concept that felt very loungy, right? We're the Learn team, and we teach people how to use tools like Photoshop and Illustrator through short form tutorials on our website. So I wanted to make learning feel fun. So I sketched a lot of concepts of what that Miami Adobe Learn booth could look like. We went through so many design iterations, but I knew two things were firm. I knew that I wanted to have Cienfuegos Mobile Ventanita Cup as our Cafecito mascot. And I knew that I also wanted to have the opportunity to feature and host incredible artists like Steve and Lillian of Dalazine in the booth. So that concept continued to evolve. We were so committed to that lounge-like idea where people could learn through video tutorials, but we wanted the programming to feel culturally relevant. I felt the inner pressure as a Miamian to make it feel true to locals. So I thought, well, if we have a Cafecito truck, is this a moment where we could incentivize participants to give us feedback on our website? Could this be a moment where, you know, we give them Cafecito and they give us survey insights on how to improve our website? And so this required a lot of logistics, right? It wasn't just me. I was working with content directors, product directors, as well as a partnering education team on the booth. But after months of planning and sketching, the idea came to life. We were able to successfully host local artists in the Learn Lounge and generate excitement for the work we do on Learn. And as a surprise to no one, the Cafecito truck was a hit. So a lot of people that were at Max weren't locals, and the concept of a ventanita was pretty new to them. But they were very pleased and over-caffeinated and maybe overstimulated as well. But we got to talk to so many of our core users, and were able to gather almost 1,000 research surveys that gave us insights on how to improve our product. And I wanted to make a lasting Miami impact, right? So in addition to hosting the artists in the lounge, I also thought that this could be an opportunity to redesign and update our catalog page. So our digital directors loved the idea of having Miami-specific programming in honor of Max on our website. So as someone who is very overly ambitious and restless, I also thought it was a great idea to redesign our catalog page while planning the booth. And here it is in all its glory. And aside from that, my day job, I wanted to talk about how my illustration work was able to be part of Adobe Max Miami. So the team at Max, separate to my team, commissioned me to do a West of Chester themed mural. So the mural invited attendees to draw and leave their special mark. So I often refer to my work as a communal yearbook, and this wall served to be a communal coloring book. And that's us pictured. That's Brandon again. And that's us taking form of the shapes that we wanted to include in the mural. I also was asked by the marketing team at Adobe to host a talk about my illustration work inside of the Creative Park. So it was a much larger crowd than I was used to, but it felt really creatively fulfilling to be able to talk to friends, but also strangers about my work and my process. So with all of that, I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned along the way. The first is your plans can change. And I think there were many times in my life where I thought I had a set plan and that things would go according to that plan, and I would be proven wrong. Case in point, my photo editing career, my stumbles with patterns, and probably many more that I'm not remembering. But ultimately, there's a lot of fun that could be found in midst of frustration. And I found that the most growth happens when you're able to be adaptable and learn new things. And secondly is you can design your own life. So growing up, I didn't know anyone who had a job as a designer. My dad worked at a paint shop and my mom worked at Navarro. So it was an unfamiliar concept to me that I could ever be one. This doesn't mean that you can't become something that is unfamiliar to your family, but it might take them just a little bit to warm up to that idea. And it might also take you some time to decide what that path for yourself is. But ultimately, there is power in designing your own life. And lastly, find your community. So outside of work, it's been so much fun to find a community of people, case in point you all, right here, that I have shared interests with. So in my case, it happens to be about reminiscing about growing up in Miami and building a communal yearbook with people. But whatever your passion is, feel free to share it with people. I wasn't aware of how many enjoyed the work that I did until I put myself out there, which was very scary as an introvert, but here we are. And that is it. Thank you all so much.
So we have some time for Q&A. So if any of you have, we have some time for Q&A. First question here.
What happened to the mural?
Oh my gosh, so the mural, great question. The mural ended up being filled out completely. It was 4 panels and there were poems, illustrations, random messages. It was just like a collage of things, and some Miami specific, some not. But it was just so cool to see people and invite them to contribute to a wall. It was a great question.
Did you get to keep it or just?
No, it made its way to an Adobe office. So
Okay,
somewhere in California are palm trees and a gator. Yes.
Question, it's 2 questions. One is,
Yeah.
how difficult was it to choose what you were going to put in the ABCs?
Oh,
Because there's
yeah.
so many different things. And then the 2, from a technical standpoint, do you hand draw these like with certain acrylics or watercolors or whatever, or do you use it like on Procreate, or is it a combination?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the first part of the question was, I think it was, how did we compile the list of things that we included in the book? And the first was, it was community driven. So for every letter, I was able to crowdsource from people what they thought A should be. So again, tying in that community element. And the one that would tally up the most votes was the one that was included in the book. So again, it felt like a group project, the funnest one I've ever been a part of. And the second part was, I think about the technique. So I think it's a mix, right? Sometimes I like to draw and scan the work that I do, and then maybe I draw over it. I often use Adobe Fresco, not because I work for Adobe, but because I find it very intuitive. And there's also these, my favorite brush is the watercolor brush that they have. And I found that making the illustrations feel consistent, a lot of them I had to redo using that brush. So it felt like it had a certain kind of like theme and pattern, and it wasn't too disruptive. But yeah, it's a great question.
Question back there.
Yes, hey.
Yeah, with your work, it sounds like you play a lot like in the past with nostalgia. Like you maintain like being in the past, or do you ever go like into present, future tense with your work as well?
That's a really great question. So it feels like at first it was definitely going into the past. I was in a tiny studio, so I was trying to bring myself any comfort that I could. And that comfort was found in memories. But it is interesting to think about. I think there are certain things that I draw. I think, for example, like books and books. I think of like my teenage self going there, but I also think of like my Sunday self currently going there. So it's like a mix of both. I think mostly I feel that when the places aren't there, it feels like it's mostly nostalgic. But it is really interesting for the places that are there, and I was able to grow up and go to those as well. It's interesting to see like past versions of myself layered onto an illustration, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
This is a very simple question. So where can we
Sure.
where can we get the book?
Oh, so you can get the book at Books and Books. I'll be doing a book signing soon in December, and you can also get it at Dalazine. And online, you can purchase it on omiami.com as well as westofchester.com.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned going through a bunch of different pivots, right? And that's part of your
Yeah.
story. What is your mindset in those moments? Like, how are you not like quitting or like, pausing and kind of reinvent yourself? But what's
Yeah.
your state of mind to do that?
I think this shows a more polished picture. But as Brandon and my friends could tell you, there were so many moments where I'm uncertain and I feel like I want to give up. I think part of making my work public is giving myself a little bit of accountability, because I know that maybe if I have a tendency to kind of just try things out and maybe not like it the first time, and then I kind of, go into my corner, but I kind of try to trick myself. So I push myself out of my comfort zones and I share things publicly, because then I know that there are people that are also looking at it, and it also serves as a little bit of encouragement, right? I think oftentimes as designers and artists, we're really hard on ourselves. I'm no exception. So I've had many times where I explore something and I hate it immediately, and it'll take my friends or Brandon be like, it's not bad at all. And I continue working on it. But I think the community aspect is so important, because that helps me to grow and evolve, and it makes me want to make more work. Hey,
I have a two-part question.
sure.
Why did you hate photo editing?
Oh, okay, great
And
question.
then where or like when did you learn to draw?
Yeah. So I hated photo editing. I just felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. So I was the only person in my 20s. Everyone that I worked with was like an editor that was like in their 40s and their 50s, and they were super glamorous, right? They would talk about like, I went to a certain island that I never heard of, right? Like I went to Marco Island for my vacations. And I worked, and I was a travel magazine. It was at Condé Nast, which is a pretty big publisher. I just felt like culturally it didn't make sense for me. Maybe the point of time in my life, I just wasn't relating to them as much. And as well, the job itself was so administrative. And I felt for me that I wasn't able to really create things, so I felt kind of stuck. I was on the photo team. I was helping build plans for people and artists to go shoot photos of places, and I was just at a desk. So it just felt like it wasn't something that I wanted to do long term, but I also wasn't relating to the job. It wasn't super fulfilling. Not that all jobs have to be fulfilling. Sometimes a job is a job. But at that moment, it didn't feel right for me. And then the second part?
Like where or how did you learn to draw?
Oh, yeah. So I went to Southwest. I don't know if anyone knows some of that. Southwest, Angel knows. And I actually ended up going to an AP art studio class, which was just really an excuse to hide away and draw. So I was never really known to be like a super technical drawer, or it wasn't something that I thought that I was necessarily good at. But it was an AP studio art class. Shout out to Miss McCoy, wherever she is. She was really encouraging of me doodling and layering and collaging, and I think it was that course that really taught me that my technique was okay and I can build off of it and continue to evolve, even though it didn't look like what I thought to be typical art, right?
I have a question.
Sure.
What would you say fuels you like creatively, especially this being like a passion project, not
Yeah.
being like your main like go-to job at Adobe.
Yeah, yeah.
Like what keeps that fire? Like what fuels you creatively to add to your passion project?
Yeah.
And then also, what's your go-to ventanita in my
Ooh, that's such a good question. Okay, first part, I think what drives me or what motivates me, I feel like as a designer, as my full-time job, I often feel like I need to recharge, right? I'm also a little bit introverted, so I feel like I need time by myself to just like decompress. And I find that drawing was that part that allowed me to recharge creatively. And it started to evolve and grow. And again, I think I'm a very restless person, so even when I have time off, I'm like, what's next? What can I do next? And oftentimes that manifests into new drawings. And I really like movies, right? I feel like watching movies and drawing and idle afternoons where I'm able to get cafecito and pastelito, that feels recharging for me, but then also drawing is a really big part of connecting me to who I am. So it finds me. And my favorite ventanita, that is a tough one. We used to go to Tinta a lot as a ventanita, but the wait times have gotten to me a little bit. You gotta wait like 30 minutes for a café con leche, which is a little much. So I think I'll stay true. I like Vicky Bakery a lot. Jessie Bakery I grew up going to. It's a great one. I don't know if you remember those cake binders. They had like super elaborate cake binders.
Pinocho Bakery.
Yeah. So maybe this year will be the year I get one of those cakes. But yeah, great question. Yeah.
Good question.
Yes.
To get a two-part about your process, I feel like you get every landmark in the best, most iconic light that you can, like, whether it's Art Betters or La Vaquita, that's kind of like how I picture it in my mind. So what's your approach there? And then the second part is, what do you do when they no longer are around? Like the diner, for example, on 57th. What do you go to drop back? Is it pictures? Is it memory?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like oftentimes the sky and clouds are such a big part of my illustration. I find like if there's one consistent thing, it's like a bright blue sky. Sometimes it's a little bit more desaturated, but the clouds are something that I find are like a theme throughout. And I think that stems from being holed into a gray little studio where I was dreaming of sunshine, right? But I also think it's a little bit idyllic. So I think of like, oh my gosh, I am someone who reminisces a lot and is very nostalgic. So I often like go to memories as my safe space, and it's a place where I'm like, oh, that was a perfect time, even though it probably was not. But I romanticize the memories, and I think that like having those bright blue skies is a part of that. And I think the second part of the question was
When the landmark no longer exists.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
To bring it to life.
Yeah, so that's a mix, right? Sometimes I try to dig up old photos that I have, but then sometimes there's things that I just draw up from memory as well. And I think sometimes I like to layer little hidden messages into the illustrations. So with Allen's, there's like little shapes in there that were not part of it originally. It's just kind of like my embellishment of memory for when I can't really remember
Artistic
it.
liberty.
Exactly, I take artistic liberty. Was there ever a poster sign of a cafecito? Maybe, maybe not. But now there is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey.
So this is kind of more geared towards the Adobe, but also
Sure.
like user experience of Adobe. So you know how it's like. There's always more to learn about those platforms. So I'm wondering first what was your first like touch point with Adobe? Was it at Parsons? Maybe
Oh, that's
for
a great
photo
question.
editing? Then I guess how did that progress? And also kudos to you for as a designer ending up working at Adobe and also like teaching people how to use it because I know it's so intricate. And then just another last layer with all of the AI stuff. I don't know, I just wonder what's your experience like with like, do you think it's becoming easier? Is it harder to teach because now there's, I don't know. Just if you can talk about that.
Sure, that's a great question. I think the first part was my experience with Adobe products. And do not tell anyone on my team, but I used a pirated version of Photoshop to learn how to use it. And that was major for me. I was able to collage, sepia photos were a really big thing in the early aughts, and I played around with that a lot. And it was something that I used to collage and build on, and very pivotal, right? Because as I evolved as from a photographer to a designer, I went from Photoshop to Illustrator, and sometimes InDesign, which is not my favorite core product. But yeah, I think it's interesting because no matter where I was in my life, there was like an app that followed me along the way and was able to like enable me to make my work. And your second question was about AI, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I taught for the first time this year, and it was very interesting when I was teaching students. I wanted them to feel, when I went to school, there was so much emphasis on this is wrong and this is right, and there's only one way to do things. And I didn't want to take that approach when I was teaching. I don't think that there's often like a right answer for design, it's so subjective. So a lot of that core curriculum that I did was actually looking at a lot of designers' work, looking at Ellen Lupton, who I love, thinking about introducing them to typography of Miami, just like a culmination of things, right? That was just more so about giving them visibility into what design in your everyday life looks like. And I think that there's such a manual process in that, right? Because they're learning about history and they're recreating posters and they're making their own things that I don't think that AI really had a role in like those designs that they were making. It might have gotten a role in like the emails they were writing to me. But for the most part, I think it was a little bit more of a manual process for them. Yeah. Thank you.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Are you going to be doing more, exploring more sort of nostalgic places? I know there's like Grand Prix, Racerama, or like Carter's.
Yeah.
Are you the one making the submissions, Sergio? Am I seeing them?
All the Americas.
All of the, yeah. So that's a great question. Oftentimes, I find that like my style evolves even from like what I was doing 2 years ago. That I often want to like redo things that I had done previously. Like I had done Mall of the Americas using like this chalk brush, right? So it felt very much like a little bit of like a elementary school project in a way, right? Like the textures are reminded me of school. But now I'm like, what does that look like in watercolor? What does that look like at night? And I think that's what keeps me energized, right? Is like there's so many angles. Speaking to your question about memories and like where in time do these places exist? It's interesting to think about like how do they grow as I do? And then I'm also really interested in evolving storytelling, right? So telling more of my process. I think that I have a habit to just show like, this is my final work. And I'm really interested in showing like, this is how my work came to be, and showing explorations along the way. And I don't know what that looks like just yet, but I am really interested in that angle.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What helps you get out of like any creative blocks? Like whenever you feel like a creative block, like is there a routine or something that helps you like get out of it, like reignite or like recharge?
Yeah, this might sound a little cheesy, but I work remote, right? So I often fall victim to staying inside all day, right? And I think I make time for myself to take long walks. In Miami, it's really hard because it's so humid and hot, but it's so important for my mental health. I often can like fall into an anxiety hole where I just want to like keep in my routine, but it's making space for myself and making time for myself to do nothing. And it's just, it's so recharging for me to like walk around and try a coffee. Disconnect, yeah. Get a pastry along the way. I'm very pastry driven. And I find that like small little touch points like that, like when Brandon and I go to a walk, I'm like, is there a coffee shop along the way? Like I make these little mundane moments fun in whatever way that I can. And I find that that is very helpful for me.
They're like breadcrumbs.
Breadcrumbs along the way, exactly.
Pastry crumbs.
Exactly.
I have a question. Miami is a city that's always evolving, and you said your work's always evolving. Is there any new places that you've been, I know it's a lot based on nostalgia, but is there any new places that you feel like, ooh, I wish I would draw this?
In Miami or in general?
Yeah, in general.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So, not to bring down the tone a little bit, but my dad passed away this year, and as a way to like process a lot of emotion, Brandon also suffered loss as well this year. We went to Madrid for 5 weeks. So we brought our dog Pepito, and we were there for 5 weeks, and that was so important for like my mental health. I'm also someone that doesn't really go on vacation ever. I kind of just like, I am a creature of habit. And being there for 5 weeks, I was so interested in like, oh my gosh, I want to draw cathedrals that I never see. Like this is in Oncayocho. That I felt like a very big draw to that, and I felt like very creatively inspired. I actually made one of my favorite illustrations in Madrid, which was an Ojalá one. Not pictured here, but if you go on my Instagram, you might see it. It was really interesting because I found myself drawing more people as opposed to places. So it's interesting to see like how the memories can shift and how the art can evolve with it. Thank you. Did you have a question?
Yeah, like how do you feel like your process has evolved between like having it as a more private process as opposed to like a more, it seems like a more public, like opinion-based process, including yourself too?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with the ABCs, it really pushed me out of my comfort zone. So it gave me something to, for every letter, I had to write a poll, right? And I had to interact with people and ask them, what do you think A should be? And gather and share work along the way. And oftentimes I would also share things that didn't make it onto the book as well. So that was really cool. I was able to show not just like the final product, but the explorations along the way. And that part feels fun for me. It's also a little intimidating because I'm like, what if this sucks and I'm sharing it to people? It's not fully baked yet. But more often than not, it's so much more rewarding than just like doing it by myself and holing up in my little introverted bubble.
Oh, and then are people ever mean to you?
Oh, yeah. People ever mean? Have you spoken to my mother to know? I think so. Like, I think it doesn't happen often. I think that I've cultivated a space where people are really nice and kind. And I don't know how that happened, but I feel really lucky that it did. Because oftentimes I feel very recharged by the people. And yeah, I feel like the right people found me. And I think so. I think sometimes I get like troll accounts. For example, like if I draw a restaurant or something, people will say, that's not the great restaurant. And I'm like, I am not a food critic. I am not a restaurateur. I am just an illustrator, and I'm drawing my memories. Yeah, it's a grain of salt.
Are
Yeah.
you only sharing your work on Instagram, or do you share across other social media platforms?
Yeah, so I'm trying to evolve more in like a video-like way where I'm trying to like show my process a little bit. So I have been posting a little bit more to TikTok, but I think Instagram is still like my main one. But yeah, I am interested in seeing how like video can layer with my work.
I feel like Pinterest is also a fun
Ooh,
place
yeah.
for visuals.
Yeah, might have to
Yeah.
take a look there.
I have I guess a statement.
Sure.
A question. Sorry.
And then you have to make.
It's just coming from somebody that's born and raised in Miami.
Yeah.
Over the years, and it's safe to say anybody here is from Miami. Miami, its charm has kind of dwindled, and it's suffered a lot. It's not the same as it used to be. So I just wanted to personally say thank you for doing what you do, for keeping the charm alive that is Miami. So thank you for keeping our community and keeping that charm of Miami alive.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, it feels like oftentimes when I speak to people from work, right, that aren't from Miami, they have this like visual of Miami and what it is, right? And it's often this like very fancy and like a brickle and all these establishments, and it feels so disconnected to what we know. So it feels cool that I don't feel like I'm doing it alone. I feel like I'm building it alongside a lot of people, which I think is the most rewarding part. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I think that to piggyback off that a little bit, it's like you meet people now and they're surprised you're from Miami.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, we're all in Kendall. So it just feels like that.
Yeah.
It's like, we're here, we're still here.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course. Yeah.
One last thing, it's kind of a comment, maybe a question, but
Sure.
I feel like in your work, usually in design, it's a lot about, the design work, but your work has a lot of like educational like
Oh, cool.
parts to it. Like you teach at Miami, like you've done a lot of like internships. Like it seems like you're very into the like learning, but also teaching. Like at Adobe, you're on the learn team, and I just think, also your work, it just looks like very, I don't know, friendly. Like
Thank you.
colors, like the ABCs of Miami. I don't know. I think that's really cool, in that you like teach it and continue to evolve. And so I don't know if that's maybe something. I'm just curious if that's something that you're also interested in. Teaching and like being an educator in a way, just because it kind of stands out. I think it's really cool.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it definitely is something that's interesting to me. I mean, growing up, I didn't know what a designer looked like. I didn't know what a creative job looked like. I think so often I was told, you know, my parents are immigrants, right? So they're on survival mode constantly. And I think that part of what I want to do is like make design and art feel accessible for everyone, and make it feel like through teaching or through art in any way that I can, like deconstruct that and be a resource. So if someone sees what I'm doing and it hopefully inspires them, they can see that it's also possible. I'm trying to be the adult friend that I didn't have growing up. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause again.
Thank you.